Morning everybody, welcome along to the Draft Development and Financial Contributions Policy and Revenue and Financing Policy Hearings and Planning and Resource Consent Fees and Charges, Hearings and Deliberations. It's a mouthful to get us underway. Just looking around the room, we're all here, so there's no apologies. Just a reminder to councillors that our submitters will have around 5 minutes to talk to their submission, and then we'll be asking questions of their submission or something that they have said. And first up, it's welcome to Sarah Perriam-Lamp, and Sarah her submission is on page 22. Morning, Sarah. Can you hear us, Sarah? Are you there, Sarah? No, that's Philippa. Okay, we might just have a wee break and get Sarah on the line. Do you want to just stop the stream there? Ian, thank you. Matt is here. If you want to come up to the table, Matt, that'd be great. Matt McLaughlin from Strohan Fields Limited. And Matt's submission is page 51. Hi, Matt. Thanks for coming in. And the floor is yours for around 5 minutes, and then 5 minutes for councillors to ask you some questions.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Look,
Just hit your button again there, mate. You just turned it off. Yep. Thank you.
red light.
That's it.
Gotcha. Sorry, technical issues. Look, thanks for having me this morning. So I'm here on behalf of Strohan Fields Limited. We're doing a subdivision south-east of the township. We are through probably about 180 lots, another 80 odd to go, and we've also just recently lodged a plan change request to rezone out the back for a further 350 lots. So Strohan Fields have got a vested interest in the district and keen to continue development. So, I just want to reiterate that Strohan don't disagree with growth pays for growth. I guess what we just want to express this morning is, there's a lot of talk or rhetoric around developers causing all the issues, so they have to pay for it. We're looking through the policy stuff for this review. It seems that it's very historical already, and our position is that yes, increased costs also hurt us as well. We are dealing with at the moment increase in construction costs, fuel costs obviously. So we've got to put those back onto section prices, which then affect purchases, and we're very much, in terms of Ashburton section market is very much price point. We have not increased our prices since we started, as we very much know that we are targeting a pretty niche market in terms of affordability and so on. So the other thing is that Strohan does is we actually cover a percentage of the development contribution for the purchasers once they settle or lodge their building consent, which I think is around $7,500 anyway. So, every purchaser at Strohan knows that they pay X amount anyway, so it's not as though it comes as a surprise. So yeah, we don't disagree with growth pays for growth, but we just, want to express our concerns around the increase in costs and the capital outlay that we have to put forward. And yeah, look, we want to continue our strong working relationship with the council and deliver, more good, affordable housing for a growing district.
Great. Thank you. First question, Mia Liz.
Thank you. Morning, Matt. Just a question. Do you have developments in other districts, so Selwyn, where their development contributions are collected at subdivision stage?
Yeah, 100%. We've done developments, a couple of big ones in Lincoln. We've just finished one in Prebbleton, and obviously I've been involved with a number of big developments in Christchurch City. So, the same developers here, yeah, we know the process, we know how it works. I guess some of the bigger developments we've done in Lincoln have been slightly different in terms of contributions because we have actually funded a lot of upfront infrastructure that is needed. So, there's obviously a little bit more at play around developer agreements and so on, which get taken off our contributions. And we've also worked with other developers in big plan change areas where we've funded infrastructure and obviously had that taken off development contributions and credit because we're providing that up front. But yeah, know the process very well.
Okay.
Councillor Gilkison.
Hi there. I just wanted to understand, in your words, so when this if this change goes through, how does that change your processes and like pricing and like when things happen from a consumer level and for your level?
Well, I guess the change comes as obviously we would have to, put more capital up front, development contributions are paid at 2 to 4, it means we have to fund that amount fully upfront. A lot of our settlements are, say, on 3-month terms, so we don't actually start getting any money back for another 3 months anyway. So it's that side of it. The increase as well obviously would have to go into the section prices to cover that cost. We're not in a, if development was easy, everyone would be doing it. The margins are very tight. We were not down here making billions. So, at some point the user will pay. It's just a matter of, I guess, how we manage that, because, as I said before, we know Ashburton is very much a price point market. So it's, a 10 or 15 grand increase on section prices is quite significant here. In Christchurch City, you'd probably be able to wear it. It's different down there. You're still getting $850, $900, $1,000 a square metre. But here it's different. So, we have to be very careful around where we allocate our costs. And, again, we're fronting or holding that cost for a longer time.
Am I allowed more questions? Sure. So in terms of the time frame, is July 2027 long enough for you to kind of work out your systems?
Oh, look, I guess from Strongfield's perspective, yes. It's not as though you're chucking it on them this July. So, yeah, look, whatever decisions are made, I think, from our point of view, the time frame is sufficient to manage that. And then obviously, we would then have to work out how we redo our sale and purchase and in our agreements, because, as I said, we actually foot a significant portion of the development contribution. We're obviously paying reserve contributions anyway, but the time frame is okay if the decisions are made.
Okay. One more. There was an idea floated at the workshop where, instead of at subdivision but also not at consent, if it was triggered at the purchase of or the sale of the section, and so when that transaction happened it would trigger the DC being paid. How would that impact you? Do you think that could work?
Yeah, it would, because obviously, are you talking it would trigger it at settlement or purchase?
Yeah, at settlement of the purchase of the
so
land.
they
So they
sign
buy
it and then
they
settle.
Yeah.
Look, definitely, I guess that would alleviate some of the capital input at the start. But again, I guess from our perspective, we don't want a complicated setup. We just want the process to be very simple. It's very clear. As I said, settlements can range from 10 days to 3 months to 6 months, depending on who it is. And we have a good group of builders who follow us around, so they get slightly longer terms. But yeah, look, I think for us it's more around the how much money we're putting in early versus when we start getting it back is probably the big one, because we always obviously pay interest on that outlay.
So when you talk about settlement, do you mean at the end of the house is actually built or
No,
is it just the land?
so settlement for us would be say they do a sale and purchase agreement and they settle on title, or 3 months after title, or 6 months after title. It's not necessary at the house being completed.
Right.
No.
Okay.
It's generally based on title here. Sometimes we've done it on 2 to 4, but it's generally the agreement in terms of who it is and what that settlement term is.
Okay. Thank you.
But we are flexible on that settlement term. We're not very much 5 days or 10 days. We do cater for various people.
Okay, final couple of questions. Councillor Todd.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. I enjoyed reading your submission, actually. It was, you covered quite a few different topics there. Collecting DCs when applying for a building consent, you say, is quite unique. But it also causes some consternation with the purchaser of the section who find out sometime later that they've got that extra cost. So that's the feedback we get from a council point of view. So if it was paid at subdivision stage, there are no surprises, I suppose you could say.
Yeah, I guess I reiterate though, I guess we're a little bit more unique, and I can't speak for other developers in that our sale and purchase agreements are very specific in that Strowan Fields do cover a set amount of the development contribution, and all that purchasers need to do is let us know when they've lodged their building consent, and then we pay that. So we set out very clearly how it works, so it's not so much of a surprise. So, you know, and again, I do agree, it is a very unique situation here, but, you know, you don't necessarily have to follow suit of the big brothers. But, you know, I guess, you know, the point is for us, it works. For others, it may not, but, you know, we were very clear, and we've done this since stage one. We've been very clear that we would cover X amount. I don't think it's gone up. It's around $7,500. So, yeah, there's no surprises from our purchases around it, and it's worked fine as far as we can see.
And final question, Councillor Moffat.
Morning. I noted, I'm not sure if it's your submission, one of the submitters suggested paying the DCs in phases. Would something like that work, do you think, for you?
Look, I think potentially that becomes too complicated. You know, people, you know, again, I'll reiterate back to us, you know, we just pay when people lodge their building consent. So if they settle, you know, they may take another 3 months to do their building consent, then they'll come to us and then we'll contribute, and then they'll pay the balance, whatever happens. I think, yeah, again, I don't know if that would solve the problem, and personally, I think that would become too complicated if you started phasing it. I think, you know, the decision has to be made. It's at whatever stage it is, that is the stage. You know, I think if you started phasing it like that, it would be more complicated than what it is now. And yeah, I don't think it has to be. I don't think you need to phase it that way. You know, as I said, for us it works, but for others it may not.
That's all the questions we have, Matt. Thank you for your submission, and thank you for coming in to speak to it as well. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for the time.
Okay, next up, Clark. If you want to hop up to the, jump in where Matt was, that'd be great. Clark's submission is on page 66, councillors. If you just push the right-hand button and the mic will go red, and then you'll be live, Clark. Basically 5 minutes to speak to your submission, and then around 5 minutes questions from councillors.
Okay. Yep,
Floor's yours.
Thank you. So I just thought I'll probably just skim over, like when my submission came in, it come through in a different format, so I'm not sure how easy it is for those to follow. But my first submission there is about the no roading DC, and it's just really about the fairness about how the tax is applied, and whether the tax is intended to be a wealth tax on people that build new homes, whether that's the intention. Because if we just look at scenarios where, say you have a family where all the members have left home, and then you have the mother or widow that then looks to downsize the house, and so then she decides to move into a small new house, and so she's paying additional tax, which you otherwise wouldn't do. So is that fair that someone that goes into a new home pays an additional tax? And then the question comes to, if you say have a small house and you look at renovating and add on a few rooms, and there's no DC charges, so what's you know, where's the balance in that? So, you know, I see for the person that extends a home, you know, yes, they have already paid a DC, I guess, at some point, but the person who's already had an existing home then downsized is also paid tax there. So my view is that I think that the fairest portion is that all ratepayers pay equally in the tax, and rather than burden it on new housing and put extra cost on economic growth, that everyone contributes. So that's the basis of that submission. My next submission is partly opposed. So yes, we are unique, and at the timing of when the DCs are currently paid. So when someone does go to build a home, sometimes they can get a nasty surprise with that, because they haven't had the developers, whoever's building them a house, identify that. They've only identified what the actual build cost is. But you know, the building consents can also come as a bit of a surprise to some of those people. So I don't know, you can't necessarily cater for all, but if it was built into the section, then there's probably only one variable, which is the building consent cost. So yeah, I do understand that. But the big issue with this submission is really about the timing and the levying of this. So I believe that the time frame of implementing it is way too short. So as a way of example, I mean, I work in the property industry as a salesperson and valuer, and work with a number of clients, and Kieran will be speaking after me, which I've been working with him on his development, and that, by way of example, started in, I think I had the dates in there, but yeah, April 2021. So we're now 5 years on, and then the subdivision process is still to be implemented, and there's a fair amount of work. So what that means, and in dollar terms, and I'm not sure if everyone's got the table there that can see that, but so the private plan change had a proposal of 160 sections there. So at that $12,319 per section, and developers pay higher interest rates than this is a standard residential homeowner. So their outlay, just their initial outlay, is 1.971 million based on that proposal, and at an estimated holding sell down period will be an additional cost of 1.192 million. So that's significant, and developers are the margin traders. So when they go into a project, the market value of the section is established, and the developer doesn't determine that, the market does. So it's what the interest rates are doing, it's what people are earning for their wages. So that determines what the section will sell for. So the developer, they can see an opportunity that they need to buy the land at X amount of dollars to make it work. What this has done, it's actually robbed them or taken away any margin that they'll have. So that project for them is in significant risk of coming out on the wrong side. And not all developments make money. So you do get a lot of developers who are here 1 minute and gone the next. So that the timing of that needs to be seriously considered. And just by way of another example, this is one I'm selling here. So this is Carlisle Estate. So this is over in Tynwald, and so we listed this in March 2022. So it's been going for 4 years, 2 months. There's 11 sections sold. There's 15 more to sell. So in terms of their recovery, I mean, this is a smaller subdivision, so there's only 26 sections there, but that's 320,000 of DC charges that these developers would have to pay, and they have to fund that until they can recuperate those section sales. So based on the current rate, that's going to take 9.8 years to sell out all those subdivisions, so that's going to add a whole significant layer of cost. So when I talk about your timing being short, I think it's got to have to be pushed out if it's to come in, beyond a 5-year period, because there are people who are in these projects that they're going to be unreasonably burdened with cost. And there was one other point I was thinking on that. Yes, so now wearing my valuer's hat, so because developers are margin traders, those people that own existing property, whether it be residential D or residential C land, but block land which is undeveloped, for them to realise their value for their property, they've got a short time frame to do something with it, either develop it or get it onto a developer to sell. Because of these holding costs which have been imposed, it's actually writing down value of our existing ratepayers who have those properties, which again I think is unfair. So that's a consequence of the short time frame of bringing that in. If it's pushed in a longer time frame, of 5 years or longer, then I think that would be a lot easier to handle, and the market would sort itself out a lot easier.
We'll just get you to wrap up, Clark.
Okay.
Thanks.
So then in my final one is just really about the allocation to be considered. So I think the majority of submissions, everything is really around residential. Question really comes to what about the other sectors of the market? And we're talking about subdivision of land, and how does that relate to commercial property? Those sections are all subdivided. If someone is to rebuild, are you going to have a mixed policy where you're going to have ones on invoices of new builds? Then if you're going to have mixed use, like one which is recently built on East Street, then how are things going to be levied there? So I'm at a bit of a loss there, and in the policy I couldn't see anything that relates around the rural properties, and we've got a really significant roading network around that, and how those roading costs are implemented across the whole network. So when I read the policy, there's a lot of gaps in it, which I can't comment apart from make questions on. Yep, thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to questions. First up, Mayor Liz.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Do you think Ashburton is more attractive for developers because of the way we collect our DCs? And we know we're a bit of an outlier because Selwyn collects it at subdivision, and we've been collecting at building consent. So do you think that's the reason we have these developments here? Is that in your view?
I think it's relative. So it's relative to your market. So again, it comes back to the developer being margin traders. So, they will pay X amount for that block land, and then the development aspect in it. So it's the developers come in at the margin. It's probably more attractive for the landowners as a whole, but I also think our market has generally been an affordable market. So our ratepayers that buy the sections or improve properties with houses, we are relatively affordable to other parts of the country. I think what this policy will do will be to actually stop growth, or it'll be a big restrictor on it, at least in the short term, and then it's going to become that affordability issue is going to come in. But I don't think you can't get any more money from the market in terms of what they will pay for housing. It's just their market is what it is, and I think we're actually pretty fortunate to be an affordable market.
Thank you.
Councillor Gilkison.
Hi there. I'm going to ask you the same question as the last one, which was around timing. At the workshop, the idea was floated to charge the DC at settlement of the purchase of the land. How would that impact things?
That would take away the significant burden. Yep, that would.
So from a developer perspective, it would be okay?
Yeah, because it's about the funding of it. So that model there for Coniston, they're having to, the extra cost of the funding is that 1.192 million. So, yeah, I think in principle that sounds reasonable.
And from a sales perspective, because you're dealing with the customer directly, easy to communicate?
Yes, yep. I mean, what will probably happen is that obviously the sections will have a jump in price relative to the DC, but yeah, it would be relatively simple.
Because would you charge it, would you just wrap it into the price, or you would just say, this is the section price, just letting you know this DC will trigger when you buy it, and this is the extra?
Yes, so the market pays a figure for what they'll have the end developed house at, and they're currently paying that figure now, and they pay that at time of building consent. So it'll be still paid for, but it'll be just paid for in that section value. So it's the same principle for the homeowner, and effectively the same for, well, the developer will be in a neutral position, so be the same position.
Okay.
And that would alleviate the timing issue.
Councillor Wilson.
Morning. The HUE allocation for business, I'm pleased to see you've talked about there, which is, you know, how retail businesses are charged a higher rate, and you've talked a bit about that. So are you seeing that, you know, the retail businesses in Ashburton, you know, can they afford this extra bit, or, you know, how do you see that whole industry going? Because obviously, that's been a charge because of the retail causing more cost.
Yeah, I think that model is potentially a little bit broke, putting it back onto retail and the movements for that. And the reason why I say that is the nature of retail is now international retail, and I think it's actually unfairly burdening our local retailers, and I think they provide a service to us. You know, all the courier drivers that come in using our roads, you know, they're not contributing to that tax, but our retailers are still having to compete against them. So I know that our retailers, they really struggle, and our commercial market in the CBD is quite depressed, and, you know, I guess we need population to grow it, but we're competing on an international market. So I think that needs to be addressed, and I think that's, yeah, it is too high, and you won't see, like, I mean, if you look at Eastfields, they've sort of struggled to get things off the ground in there as well, and that's just a component of it.
Councillor Gilkison.
So carrying on from that conversation, a supermarket is also classified as a retailer. So how do you think that forms the opinion? Because I get it for the CBD, but for a supermarket, is your opinion the same?
No, it'd be different, and you do classify that differently in your document. Supermarkets, medical centres, they do have different ratings. Yep.
That's it for questions. Clark, thanks for your submission, and thanks for coming in to talk to it. Appreciate your time.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, Clark.
Next up, Kieran, you can hop in the hot seat. I'll get you to hover over that one and just, and the right-hand button, if you push that and the light should go red. Yep, your mic's live now. So just 5 minutes to talk to your submission, and then we'll around about 5 minutes worth of questions from the councillors.
Right, thanks for having me, everybody. Like, I won't read through the whole thing, and you guys have obviously read it, but also Clark's probably touched on a few areas as well, but I'll just go through and pull some pieces out of it, and then we can have a bit of a discussion after that.
Just quickly, councillors, page 72, if you haven't got there already. Thanks, Kieran.
So essentially, I don't support the introduction of a new roading development, and this is based on the large increases already sort of over the last 4 odd years. Every dollar added to the cost of development that cannot be absorbed is either passed on to the end purchaser, making housing less affordable, or renders a project unviable altogether. When a development does not proceed, the council does not just forgo the roading contribution it is seeking, it loses the entire revenue package associated with that project. The full development contribution, reserves contributions, building consent fees and associated incomes. The financial case for a new contribution must be weighed against the real risk that it suppresses the development activity the council depends on to generate that revenue in the first place. I urge the council to model the sensitivity of development viability to cumulative DC increases before introducing any new contribution, and to consider whether the current trajectory of charges is reaching a point of diminishing returns for the district. Collecting the development contribution at subdivision stage, in principle I don't have an issue with this. However, as Clark's mentioned, it's about timing. To require it at an early stage of a subdivision passes on a huge burden to developers. Well, personally, I think it should be collected at the sale of those properties or that land. Would really be the only fair way to do this. Otherwise, a developer must carry that full burden up front, and it could be several years. As an example, the Coniston Park development, as Clark's mentioned, we're 5 years in. That could be another 5 to 10 years to complete that development. So we're talking large sums of money. Just want to touch on the wider economic consequences of increases and general difficulties with developing, which could drive developers away. I just want to draw the council's attention to the broader community and economic consequences of increasing development costs to a point where growth is discouraged or stifled altogether. Development activity does not exist in isolation. It is the engine of a local economy. When developments proceed, the benefits flow across the entire Ashburton community in ways that extend well beyond council's balance sheet. Consider the flow-on effects of a subdivision or new housing development going ahead. Builders, electricians, surveyors, you name it, and then it flows down to all the other areas, you know, local retailers, hairdressers, you name it. Development also spreads through rates, spreads the burden of council infrastructure along a wider area. So when a development comes to town and you add another 160 or 170 lots, for example, that's another 160 or 170 lots of rates coming into council's coffers. Conversely, if developments do not proceed because the cost burden has made them unviable, these benefits do not materialise. The district does not simply stand still, it falls behind. Businesses that depend on growth-driven demand, young families who cannot find affordable housing leave for other centres. The ratepayer base stagnates, placing greater pressure on existing ratepayers to fund the same level of services. We understand that council is facing forecast financial shortfalls, and that pressure exists to recover the full cost of growth infrastructure. We do not dismiss those pressures. However, we submit that increasing development contributions in a way that deters growth is not a solution to a funding shortfall. It is a compounding of it. Less development means less revenue from DCs, fewer consents, less rates, income from new properties, and ultimately a smaller economic base from which to fund council services. Before imposing further cost increases on the development sector, we strongly encourage council to look inward and identify efficiencies and savings within its own operations. In an environment where households and businesses across the district are managing costs carefully, it is reasonable to expect council to demonstrate that it has done the same before seeking additional revenue through charges that flow directly into the cost of housing. I'll just touch quickly. So looking at the Coniston Park development of 160 sections, this change creates an extra cost of around about 1.2 million of holding costs. I guess the big thing is we purchased this land 5 years ago based on numbers that we did at the time, based on council's current policy, and we've essentially lost that value of that land. And the other thing is too, anybody at the moment with developable land in the Ashburton area will face the same burden, and that will minimise the value of their land currently. And I guess maybe the general ratepayer probably doesn't understand that at the moment, but they're potentially going to find that out if this carries on. I mean, there is a possibility that if this proceeds as proposed, that Coniston Park may have no choice but to look at legal action against ADC for this loss. The other thing I want to touch on is, on a broader side of things, ADC already have a bit of a reputation for being a little bit anti-development and not overly helpful with projects. And I think that's really disappointing. I'm pretty passionate about the area, and I want to see it going forward. It's a very prosperous area, and I'd like to see a council that grabs a hold of that and is positive about developers. Developers are not the enemy. In fact, they're only responding to a growth of a town. And you guys have an economic development manager who goes out and pushes the community, drives people to come here, and developers will only do a development if there's demand there for land. So I find it very disappointing that sometimes from this council we get a feeling that it's something against the developer. We should be working as a team to make the place better, to drive growth, to bring in more income. So I guess that's what worries me about this. This is, to me, just another thing that's a little bit attack the developer, anti-development, and I really don't want to see that going forward.
We'll just get you to wrap up, Kieran. Thanks.
The only other thing I'd say is I'd like council to look to other areas. Selwyn's a good example. Look at how they do things. Selwyn, as an example, is a very forward-thinking council. They drive, they go out to developers and say, how can we help you do another development? Because they can see that it creates income for them. So I'd like to see a bit more of that going forward. Yep, that's about all I've got to say. Any questions?
Awesome. Okay, we'll start with Mayor Liz.
Thank you. Morning. We had Matt from Stronefields and as our first speaker, and he said that they subsidise the DC, I think to a tune of $7,500. I think I heard that right. Is it normal for developers to do that? And do you do that as well? Is that something that you do?
No, we don't, but it's not really relevant, because at the end of the day, we're buying a piece of land, sometimes 5-10 years in advance, in the hope that, down the track might be another 5 or 10 years' time that we make some money. At the end of the day, we're buying that land with a margin. However you skin the cat, it doesn't really matter.
Councillor Cameron.
Thank you. I have two questions, please, Kieran. Thank you for your presentation. You talked about efficiency savings. We have gone through a lot, and it's something that we're all very keen on, efficiency save. Do you have any sort of high fives where you can suggest efficiency savings?
To be honest, I probably see things very regularly with this council where I think that they could be a lot more efficient. It's probably a discussion for another day, but I mean, I'm more than happy for anybody to call me and sit down, and I can give you some examples of
I think we'd all, if there's genuine savings to be made in the operational expenses of the council, then of course we'd all be interested to hear that.
Absolutely.
The other question I have is, we've heard that we're a price inelastic market. So we're very attractive to people to move here because of our low cost housing, or less expensive, more affordable, I think is the word that people have used. And that's part of that is because, we keep our section prices are reasonable, and also the DCs are charged later. Is that not the case with other parts of the district? Like if you look at other, I think Mayor Liz has brought up Selwyn, and there's Lincoln, and there's other areas where the DC is charged at subdivision, at the consent for subdivision. So we differ from the rest of Canterbury, even though we're very, in terms of our GDP, we have a greater proportion, than the rest of Canterbury per capita. So we're a more affordable area than the rest of the district.
Yeah, but
Community.
I mean, I guess it's all relevant, isn't it? I guess the issue really here is, like, again, we don't have a problem with paying the DCs, but it's a timing issue. That's really what it is. And where it's proposed at the moment is going to come at a cost, and that's going to have an effect. And that effect might be extra cost, driving up those prices, which will deter people from coming to the area. Or it might be that developers might go, well, actually, this is just getting too hard here. We'll go elsewhere.
And elsewhere, we've had some material elsewhere, and I could be wrong, but elsewhere I think they charge the DCs a subdivision in Canterbury.
Yep, that's right. But it's been something that's always been in place. So it's a timing
It's
thing.
a timing thing, is what
It
you're
is,
saying,
yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll have a lot of questions, but I'll let someone.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'd like just to explore that a bit more. That the market in Ashburton, obviously, non-developer, look and see a lot of new sections and that going on. Do you think the market is becoming saturated, or is there room to grow? We council would always believe we want more to grow, and the government is saying that make sure there's enough land available for everybody to grow, and so you're not stifling the market as it was and causing things to go up, with a bit of pressure as it was on it. In your view, has the market got room to grow in Mid-Canterbury, or is it getting saturated?
No, absolutely. There's room to grow. I mean, it's all market driven. Yep, things are a little bit subdued at the moment, but we've still got a shortage of housing and developments going on. I mean, it's a prosperous area. People want to live here. We just want to make it accessible.
Councillor Moffat.
Hi. You said that other councils make things easier for developers in some ways. Can you give me a couple of examples of how they do that?
Okay, I'll give you one example that we're dealing with at the moment. So we're doing a 24-lot subdivision on Carter's Road, and we're about halfway through construction, and we are trying to determine the landscaping and finish of the subdivision. And so I've gone away and got our landscape designer to draw up, a nice looking subdivision as they would from out of the area. We've presented that to council, and then they've said, no, we don't want that. We want you to take a lot of that beautification, plantings, things that make a subdivision look nice. So we've taken that out. So it's gone back to the architect again. He's redrawn it. Now, somewhere along the line, council has said that we've asked for a policy to tell us what's actually required. Council has turned around and said, no, we don't have a policy. However, we just follow Selwyn's policy. So then we've got Selwyn's policy. We've redrawn the development again, paid again to have it done. It's come back, and they've said, oh, okay, yes, some of those parts of Selwyn's one we like, some of it we don't. So now it's going back again. So now we're having this back and forward that's been going on now for probably 6 months. So council doesn't have an actual policy. That's what's causing a lot of the problems there.
Right, that's it for questions. Kieran, thanks for your submission. Thanks for coming in, your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, councillors, it is just about 10 o'clock. I think a good time for us to take a wee break and have a cup of tea, and then continue with considerations. back. Draft development and financial contributions policy and revenue and financing policy consideration of written submissions. We'll just go through the booklet, starting with the first one, which is Chris. Happy to take questions as we go, councillors. Any questions on Chris's submission? Councillor
I
Cameron?
don't have a question. I have a question on the process. We won't have a question on the submission because Chris isn't here to ask the question. So are we just going to, what are we going to do? Discuss them or highlight the main aspects, or how
Is that how you'd like us to do it, Richard?
Yes, please. We've got a presentation that will follow that has listed the issues that officers have identified, and it's an opportunity then for you to add in, subtract if you don't think they're issues, and to give us guidance on any particular information that you want.
Just a question.
Councillor Moffat?
I have overall points relating to the submissions in general. I haven't actually pinpointed individual submissions. Can I ask general questions from what I've observed rather than going through each one?
Yeah. At the end, Richard, would you? Yep, I'm seeing nods from Mark. Yep. Okay with that, Julie? Sweet. Any talking points on Mr. or Mrs. Cameron's?
Sorry, just on the
Oh, Russell?
first one,
Councillor Hoss?
comment there about phasing in changes. How simple in-house would that be to do? Because that sounds quite complicated to me and just may lead to issues. So would phasing in the changes be a simple process, or?
What I had envisioned in terms of a phase in would be that if you had an increase in a charge, you could phase it in over 2 or 3 years. So the 2-year phase in would be half the first year, full charge the second year, and over 3 years, same sort of principle.
Neelis?
Thank you. I'm on the Cameron's submission, and just their first point saying, I would like to see the portion of the DC that is for roading kept separate for use on roading only, and that's the intention, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And just another comment, just on the answer to question 3 was never good having to pay fees at building consent time. Often purchasers of section land did not know they would have to pay, and it's quite a lot to add on to the consent costs. And I think that's what we've been hearing from the public is that has often happened, even though in the workshop, I think when that was mentioned, a lot of the real estate agents didn't think that that was the case, but we have heard that.
Councillor Cameron?
If I go down to Greg Martin at Arrowsmith Law's submission, we didn't hear today from any purchasers. Beg your pardon?
Sorry, carry on.
Is it okay?
Yeah, just jumped ahead, so that's fine though. We haven't got anybody else lined up.
Well,
for
it's only the number 4. It's only one
Yep.
down. We didn't hear from today from any purchase of sections, but I think what Greg has written supports the view that we've often heard from. We heard them in Methven a few years ago about people getting nasty surprises and not really understanding when you pay the DC. So I think Greg Martin makes a good point that if DCs are charged, it would be easier for the purchaser of the section. Regardless of how perfect you think your communication channels are, and we think the real estate agents communicate that there's a DC payable, or the builders or whomever, it doesn't seem to be meeting the entire market, and from what we have heard. So I think he makes a good point that I think we need to keep in mind.
I think often there's a lot going on at that time for a person building, and maybe some of that information doesn't actually hit home. It's you know, Councillor Everest.
I just wonder, and it's covered in the submission we're considering here, whether in fact we've got the overall balance right when we look at when a property is subdivided and then when it's actually being built on. So there can be quite a delay, and there's a few other submitters that actually comment on the same sort of thing. So have we actually got our rules sorted out so that no one falls between the cracks? Because actually the way the submitter writes here is that if they haven't built on that property before 2027 under the proposal that we've got there, then they would be up for a different contribution than they currently are. So, I mean, that doesn't seem consistent and fair, given that we're giving developers an opportunity to window up front, but such people aren't necessarily going to have a chance to pay up front.
Were you going to comment on that, Melis? If you turn off Phil.
I was just going to say we've got our deliberations coming up, so that's when we can debate how the process, how we'll continue with everything. But we'll probably just need to go through feedback at the moment. But I think it's a good point, and we need to be aware of every submitter's points in here.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson?
I'd agree. Can we go through the submissions, then we can wrap them up at the end, and because there's some worthy discussion, but we're going to end up going down the debate hole before we've got to all the submissions through.
I'm wondering if your question, Phil, was timely around the Cameron's submission about where the DCs go and where they're held, etc. Would you like to maybe ask that now? Turn on your mic. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, I just want to get a better understanding of just, in fact, when the development contribution's paid, then are we actually, as District Council, are we then utilising those funds straight away, or are they held in trust until the building's completed? I don't understand the program there, or the timing of that program.
Through the chair, I think that's a question we'll probably have to defer for our engineering colleagues, because they are the ones that actually administer the implementation of those funds. So we can make a note of it and then perhaps come back to you with some more information. Perhaps Richard at the deliberations, would that be a good time to have that update?
So supplementary then is the development contribution roading absolutely ring-fenced for roading? And how do we know that?
Well, that's certainly the intention for that particular, for the one that's proposed to come in for 26, because that's just focused on the 2AB project in terms of the road, so that would be particularly focused on that project. That's the intention of the policy. Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, we'll come back to that. Councillor Cookerson?
My understanding is that all the DCs are based on projects, so actually the spending's already happened and then we're just applying the funds to those projects. So the money doesn't actually sit anywhere, it just gets applied to the project. Is that correct? Or is it more complicated?
My understanding is that when a project's been built, the DC that comes in, which is to fund the gross portion, should be offset against part of the loan that reflects the gross portion. The timing of when that happens, whether it happens when it comes in, whether those contributions are gathered quarterly or half yearly or annually to apply against the loan, that's part of the mechanism I don't understand. And we did identify in earlier workshops that we were intending to do some work this year on ring fencing, and so I think bringing that information back to the deliberations on the 3rd of June should be able to put this question to rest.
Thank you. Okay. Ian Loftus submission. Any questions? Comments? Greg Martins. David Watson. Tegan Williams. Millers.
Tegan's brought up around the roading contribution and where the costs will be spread. I guess when we get the summary, that question will be answered before we do our deliberations. Would that be correct?
That would be correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Everest.
And also ask questions about how those costs are allocated, and not just on the second Ashburton Bridge, but in terms of how it's related to maintenance renewal or actually new infrastructure. And I think that's an important area that we need to sort out, because this is the start. The Ashburton Bridge is the start. It could continue on.
Councillor Wilson.
We have taken that as a whole roading network though, so the roading network does answer that question, and then I agree with you, as the paper says, going into 2027 we may bring another ones going forward, so it is we've made that decision that it's the whole roading network, not just one specific thing. So that, I understand their worry about the burden put on small rural areas, but it's the whole network does service everywhere, it doesn't just service one part or not one other part.
Councillor Gilkison.
I'd just like to counter that by saying we actually haven't decided that it's one network, because that's what we're doing right now. We're still in deliberations. It was put forward as our position. So I think we do still need to read the submissions, and if people in those areas feel like it's not fair, then we can still listen to that.
Thank you. Stephen Clark. Page 16. Christopher Pringier. Councillor Moffat.
I notice in this submission they say that the 1st of July 2027 gives a reasonable time to prepare. Just wondering if officers have had any feedback about the time frame at all, in general?
When you say internal, do you mean have we had feedback from our departments on the time frame?
Or from anyone else?
Oh, sorry.
Any other members of the public outside or anything? I know our submitters today, some didn't like the time frame.
We've obviously had the feedback that we've got through the submissions. I haven't had any, and we also had feedback at the workshop that we had with members of the development community, but other than that feedback, no.
Councillor Gilkison.
The submitter has said with regard to the development contribution charges that they should float with the costs as they rise or fall. How is that in practical terms? How would that work? Would it work?
I have to confess I don't understand the thought process of every submitter and I'm not quite sure how to interpret this particular submission. The way we set DCs is we identify the projects that have a growth component, we put them in the disclosure schedule, we divide them by the forecast growth, and those are the numbers. The rise and fall will come if we expect more or less growth or we have more or less capex.
Thanks, Richard. Jared Murphy, page 20. Sarah Perriam Lab. Millis.
Thank you. And again, this just highlights that the DC on building consent isn't widely known and passed on. So,
Councillor Wilson.
I'd be interested to understand from some of these people, they won't be able to tell us because I'm here obviously, that when they went to their lawyer to sign the thing up, because you more than likely went to a lawyer to sign up, they didn't express to them, tell them that this is part of it. So it is buyer beware with buy anything. So I'm surprised that, people sometimes looked at this and they didn't know it was things. So I'm just interested to understand how that process was worked out.
Perhaps the solicitor thought the real estate agent had done that job. And as I mentioned, there's a lot going on at this time, isn't there? Dave Foley, page 24. Lynn Bridge. Amanda Evans.
sorry, just going back, I see Lynn Bridge has suggested that the Roding DC is increased to $1,000, not, I think, what did we have, about just under 900? 889 or something like that, yeah. So that's an interesting point.
Amanda Evans, anything there? Shane Stockdale. Councillor Gilkison.
I'd just like to highlight a comment of his, which I think kind of sums things up sometimes, because DCs can be quite technical, and it is way too much gobbledygook, BS lawyers talk. Get it for the normal layman to understand and then ask the question. So I only highlight this because there is a degree of complexity in these, so just, I guess it's take things with a grain of salt, and yeah, in terms of that. We can apply our own judgment somewhere as well as the people who have been doing the workshops.
Very cool. Anonymous on page 33.
Just a question. So green fees, I guess he's talking about development contributions when he talks about green fees. It's not a golf thing.
He or she.
He or she person. He or she, yes.
That was also my assumption. And certainly golf's a lot more expensive game than I understood, if I'm wrong.
Yeah, must be.
Jess Cunliffe, page 35. Kieran Gannon. Hamish Niles.
Sorry,
Millis.
me again. So probably the first of the submitters to say that he would suggest it's paid on settlement date of the section sale, and I think we've heard that from a few submitters, so definitely a point for deliberations.
I asked Ian the question before we had the break of how that would be triggered for council. Ian, could you explain how that would happen?
Thank you. Just as an off-the-cuff kind of initial thought, it would be difficult to trigger it through the normal subdivision conditions, because effectively what has to happen is, in my understanding, and there may be alternatives, but one way you could do it would be to have a solicitor's undertaking between probably the developer or the person applying the subdivision for the 224 certificate and the council, which would require on transfer an undertaking that certain amounts of money will be paid for the development contribution. But, and Tanya might want to jump in if she thinks I'm off-piste here, but effectively you'd need one of those for each of the developments, each of the sections that was being created, because of course sometimes developments are sold incrementally, and so you'd have to have a separate agreement for each one of the sections, which would then, the money would transfer on change of ownership. There's all sorts of other complications in there that are just occurring to me as I'm speaking, including what happens if the developer doesn't sell the section and actually keeps it for themselves and builds a house and then leases it out or does something else, because that would be a risk. So the agreement that was entered into would have to be quite complex and reasonably robust, and there would also be administration costs associated on that, which you'd have to be careful not to fall onto the ratepayer and administration. Quite a complex administrative process, I think.
Councillor Gilkison?
At the workshop, I asked Michael Wong the same question, and he seemed to think that because it triggers at council anyway on settlement when you buy and sell a property, that it was actually relatively easy to then issue the DC invoice. But I do get the loophole with if the developer wanted to build the house, that is a complexity.
Through the chair, I think yes, in some ways yes it is, and probably looking operationally from something like the issue of the building consent or whatever it is, that's okay. It's the actual administration that goes a part of it and following up and making sure that those things are paid. It just looks like, it's not saying it can't be done. Don't want to say that, all options should be investigated if that's the council's will. But it's not, there does seem to be some tricky little parts to it.
Just hold fire, Deb, for a second. Tanya?
Just through the chair, just to clarify council's process and a settlement process, that council's not involved, so that settlement's between a purchaser and a vendor. The only involvement council has is when it gets a sales notice to change the ratepayer address after settlement. So we've got no involvement in the settlement process. So what Ian's suggesting is we would have to be involved at some point prior to settlement, but that's a separate process. There's no automatic trigger for us to be involved. So it would be administrative burden. We've done quite a bit of work about what other councils do, and I think that will come to you at deliberations, but probably in summary, we can't find any examples of councils that are taking it on settlement per se. Generally it's time limited, as a postponement plan or a deferred payment, rather than a settlement. Just from an administrative perspective, it would be challenging. So it's not to say it can't be done, but yeah.
Councillor Cameron?
Thank you. Can I just carry on from that point, please?
Yes.
To Tanya. If it went on settlement,
Microphone.
Beg your pardon?
Speaking to your microphone.
Oh, yeah, sure. If it went to settlement, then we'd have to invoice the purchaser? Or how would that seems like a...
No, I expect it would still be the developer, because the developer's getting settlement funds from the purchaser on settlement. So our agreement would be with the developer or the vendor.
So there had to be something, organised. That sounds like a tremendous...
It's not to say it can't be done. For potentially 100-lot subdivision that has multiple settlement days, it becomes more challenging. But
what would the time, how's your staffing, how would they manage that?
The reality is, and I think the examples that we've seen from other councils are charging administrative costs to cover the cost of
So it's more burdensome essentially.
In order to protect council, to ensure that payment was arised, there'd need to be an encumbrance or something registered on the title to make sure council has some ability to effectively claim it back. So that has a cost as well.
So there'd be legal cost to get that removed from the title.
That's correct, and that could easily happen on settlement contemporaneously with it.
A rigmarole to me.
For a lawyer, no, it's not. It's not a rigmarole per se. There's just extra admin and paperwork associated with the settlement. So.
Yeah, thank you.
Richard, you got some guidance there that we might need some more information on that.
With, in the presentation to come, that this is an issue that's been highlighted, yes.
Great, thank you. Anything further on Hamish's submission? Camilla, page 45. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. I just want to check that the points that Kim has raised, 1 to 4 under roading and 1 to 6 under the other DCs, are going to get talked about in our deliberation process rather than dealing with them one by one here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Further questions from Kim's submission?
No, it's just
Councillor Everest?
I was just in support of Russell, so that's my question as well.
Yeah, I think Councillor Wilson was the same lines. Peter Lindsay, page 48. Councillor Maxwell.
My only comment would be, and I'd made it here, and it's just because of the process we're in right now, is the inability for someone to be able to pay a DC upfront without a building consent. You know, and if you're going to sit on it for 5 years, 8 years, or whatever, you cannot do that payment in advance currently, and depending on where we land in the future, where there would be an opportunity for people to be able to do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to support that as well. I think it makes sense to have a mechanism for those who want to pay it, as they are already paying rates. So I guess it depends where everything else lands, how it kind of works in, but I think it's worth consideration depending where everything else lands.
Thank you. Councillor Everest.
Highlights an anomaly in our system at the moment and something we maybe need to sort out.
Thank you. We hear from Matt, Australian Fields. John Bell. Megan and Craig Thomas. Page 57. Councillor Gilkison.
I'm obviously just going to highlight the DC charge of Mount Somers Water being excessive.
Thank you. John Bell, page 61. We've got Clark's next. She's spoken to. Councillor Wilson.
There was one which I didn't ask the question on, but I'll bring it up now. When a replacement house is built after 5 years of property owners, it lapses and they get taxed again. So I'd just like to understand that process better in the deliberations of if you demolish a house, you still pay the rates, and how long that, because you pay rates on that existing house which doesn't exist, and if it revalued the next thing it goes down, just to understand a timeline for that so we can see what that happens, because I guess if you developed a house and the rating was done for 3 years, you'd still be paying rates on the undemolished house as it was, and then just I'd like to understand that time frame and where it works.
Okay, Richard. Thank you. Tania?
So where there's a building consent or something for a demolition of a house, council can, from the next rating year, take that into account and change the rate. So it's not we don't have to wait for the 3-year valuations. We can go to QV and get the property revalued, and it takes effect from the next rating year. And conversely, the other way around with a subdivision. So if titles are issued and a building's built in a year, the improvement value of the new building doesn't take effect until the next financial year. So.
Councillor Everest.
I presume there was some discussion when Clark presented in terms of the DC for commercial property.
Yes. Councillor Gilkison?
Just following on from that, I think it would be good to re-look at CBD retail, given that the big box retail has kind of been treated a little bit differently now, as well as a rural DC along with our roads, what that might look like. So I think we've had a bit of discussion around it, and we're waiting on submissions to see if it came up, which it has.
Thank you. Anything further on Clark's submission? And finally, Kieran Brackwell's page 72. Any further questions? Councillor Gilkison?
I wondered if I could just, seeing as Kieran's still here, just ask him one quick question. Will you allow it?
Yes.
Thank you. We discussed just before the practicalities of charging the DC at time of sale. If you got charged, say, $300 administration, is that okay? Would you prefer that or it all being done at subdivision?
Kieran, I'll get you to come up to the desk, mate, because we need to talk into the mic, so the
So
live stream.
is the admin charge a turn-off? Or do you have any ideas of how it might work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess that's some of the detail. What were you saying, Clark? Sorry. Yeah. So is it no different to how rates are levied, on sections, how they are triggered? Ask your question again. Sorry.
So we were just discussing around the practicalities of charging it at settlement of sale of the property, and the comments kind of were that administratively it was not undoable but a little bit mucky, and you'd end up with a bit of an admin charge to do it.
Yeah. So aren't rates, if you produce a subdivision and you have 100 lots, when are rates triggered on that lot? Because is that not the point when that could be done at the same time?
Yes, I think the point was that it just requires another thing that will be admin, so you might just get an admin charge of some money.
I guess that would make more sense than holding those costs, but can it not be done in alignment with the admin that's already involved in the rating? I guess is what
Well,
I'm saying.
ideally, but I'm just searching for options about what would you prefer.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
is an extra admin charge
I
a
guess
deal
it is
breaker?
No, it's not a deal breaker. If that's what was required, that makes more sense.
Okay.
Thanks, Kieran. Happy, Deb? Yep. Any further questions? Okay, Richard, I'll pass down to you you've got a presentation for us.
So today, you've got that.
Microphone. Thank you.
Today you've looked at 26 submissions. We've had 3 people appear, and from here on I just want to run through some slides identifying key points raised in each topic and get your guidance on a list of issues and any other issues you want and any other information that you'd like. So topic 1 was the new roading DC, and 24 submitters, 13 in support, 5 with supporting with changes and 6 opposed to roading DC. And those who did not support or supported with changes raised the following issues. They wanted clarity on the growth allocation and also on the causal nexus, which is the link between the development and the incurring of the development contribution. They were concerned about the cumulative effects of increased DCs on development. Some submitters were opposed to the whole of network catchment, and other submitters raised other points that were already on our radar, such as ring fencing, reporting on the use of funds, and other matters. I had also noted somewhere.
Excuse me, Richard. Councillor Cameron has a question.
Yeah, Richard, thank you. With regards to ring fencing, what happens now with the DCs?
This question was asked earlier, and
I heard it, but
and we agreed that we would bring you some advice back.
We don't know what happens now.
I don't know.
I thought the question was
detail
asked about what will happen in the future, not what happens now.
I know that with the community infrastructure DCs, they go into a reserve, and then they go out of that reserve to fund the growth portion of loans. I couldn't tell you, as I said earlier, whether that happens on a quarterly, monthly, weekly, or annual basis.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Can we find out? Oh, there's only Tanya sitting there. Is that going to be easy to find out?
Yeah, no, we'll
is it
get
just
that
a call to
clarity.
Helen, or how is it?
We'll get that clarity from finance for the deliberations and make sure we've got that clear.
Yeah.
So we don't have that detail now, and we'd rather not.
No, because that's very pertinent to have
Yes.
now.
Yep.
It
No.
should be in there.
Were there any other roading related points? Nope. Okay.
Councillor Wilson.
Just the whole of network thing is a weak comment there about rural, but the rural, if you do a building consent on a building in rural, you do pay the DC still. It's more that the difference we're talking about was a land use change rather than the building. So I think there's a wee bit of confusion there. Perhaps people think rural people didn't pay a DC on their buildings, but they do pay a roading DC if they build a new house or they build a new cow shed or something like that, the same as any other building would. I'm correct there, aren't I? Is that right? Is that the right?
That's correct. There were 24 submissions on topic 2, which was about taking DCs at subdivision and the different options for doing that. 10 supported the council's preferred option. 1 supported the 1 January date. 5 supported 1 July 2026, and 8 supported other options, including the status quo. Those who supported the preferred option believe it's better for the subdivider to pay than the homeowner. They wanted transparency, that the costs are attributable to growth. They believe it gives a fair time to adjust, and it stops council being the banker, which were many of the arguments that we put forward in our consultation document.
Councillor Wilson.
Do we have information of how many sections are available, when I'd say consented, available for sale, not in progress, or just to give us a broad number, because we heard a bit of comment about this will stop development, and whereas the council shouldn't be, one of the governments, they want us to make sure there's enough sections for sale so people don't turn up and they go, I can't buy a section. There's always one for sale, so you could go out tomorrow and buy one and build. So could we just understand how big that quantum is, in response to Ashburton, or the number of sales a year and the number of ones available to buy now would just give us a feel for that?
I've noted that as something to bring back.
Just quickly, sorry, Richard. Councillor Everest, does that sort of tick your box as far as information goes, the retrospective that we talked about at cup of tea time? Do you think the information fine?
Yes, it will help. Thank you. If we get that information.
Thanks. Thanks, Richard.
Those who supported an earlier move to taking it subdivision believed it was the right thing to do, and the sooner the better. One of those submitters commented on the need for flexibility for staged developments, or where there are long gaps between subdivision and building. Those who supported other alternatives, they raised a range of alternatives around deferred payment, including payment at settlement. And there were some questions around seeking more clarity around how that would work. They raised concerns about holding costs and upfront invoicing. Mr. Lindsay wanted to be able to pay before building consent applied for. Submitters also raised issues about the unknown final scope of a development and the impact. A number of submitters said that the impact on demand comes after houses are built, which is why it's a good idea to take DCs at building consent. Now, all those ones that are underlined are on our list to bring back more information, just to clarify.
Yeah, Liz?
And we've had information on what other councils do. When we're an outlier on this, but how other councils charge the DCs? Do they do it just at subdivision stage? Are there any that defer the payment? Could we have a little bit of that information? Maybe Selwyn's the...
Yeah, we're looking at a range of councils to bring back information on what provisions they have for deferred payments.
Yep.
What councils typically do is that they say that they'll take them on subdivision or building consent or service connection, and the normal practice is to take it at the first of those. There are a couple of exceptions, and one of them will bring back information that relates to that question of the unknown final scope. When you have a commercial or industrial subdivision, you don't always know the nature of the business that's going to go onto that lot. Yeah. And so that might be one where we follow an example where some councils take 1 HUE on every new industrial lot, and then they calculate the rest when they know whether it's a high use of water type activity or, it just depends on what the use is and the demand that it creates.
Tanya, just confirming that you said that we hadn't found, or you hadn't found, any councils that do it at settlement?
No, what tends to happen with a lot of the policies, either they don't allow any postponement or the postponement's at council's agreement, and I think it's intentionally left vague. There might be mechanisms mentioned in the policy, but not necessarily timeframes, and I think it's intentionally left vague for councils to come to an agreement on a case-by-case basis. If you said settlement for every situation, then there'll be situations where properties aren't sold. So you'd never trigger it. So, yeah.
Yeah, to be clear, Mr. Chair, when I said we'd looked at some work, it was work that Tanya's team have done, and what Tanya says is correct. We didn't find a single council that said they would, as a matter of right under the policy, allow payment at settlement. It was always a matter to be considered. Where it was allowed, it was a matter at council's discretion. And then, while there was a group of about 14 councils who had a fairly similar set of conditions, then there were a number of others who were quite light on what those conditions would be.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
One of the questions was that by taking it in early, we're going to sit on the money and do nothing with it, or that was a concept that's put out there. Could we explore, and it's probably with the infrastructure team more than the policy team, when DCs have come in, how they've been spent? Because I would have thought, I'm just interested to understand how, when a section is finished and put out on the market, we don't look and go, oh, they may sell, therefore we won't do stuff. I thought we'd be compelled, we'd have to go ahead and do the stuff that we've said, so that that's ready for the people when they shift in, not sort of wait until they come and then think, oh, we better do something. So have we got any examples of where that's happened, where we've done the work you know, that we've said we're going to do, or buying into the team, and, you know, just that concept that we don't just take a DC and sit on it and we spend it, and so we're spending it before it's actually collected nearly at the moment, perhaps.
Of the projects in the schedule for the policy that we're consulting on, 69% of the gross capex is on projects that have already been done, and 31% are future projects. And of that 31%, around 20%, or 2/3 of it, is the second Ashburton Bridge connecting road. So typically, we haven't got a lot of capex in here. That's a long way out in our future. Most of it's done or about to be done. In terms of what else you asked, I'm a little unclear as to how we would answer that question.
Did you want to follow up on that, Richard? Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Probably the roading ones, it's because we're only starting the roading one. I know the bridge is the only one, and many other districts have lots of they have lists and lists and lists of things that they've put in there for roading. So we may get that in the future, and if you're doing a Holder network, you would have all those other things in. But I thought we would have had perhaps some of the major subdivisions where some of the DCs were spent on them, because it'd be interesting to understand, if we use an example, Stroud Fields, or one of those big ones that's actually well through its program of selling and developing and building, how the DCs were spent, because it would give us some comfort that we're actually spending the money where it needs to be. And then, you know, that's the justification for charging the DC as it was.
Councillor Gilkison?
I've heard a lot today that we've done a lot of research of what other councils are doing, and I just want to point out that at one point there was a council who was the first one to do something. So I guess my question is, are we here to deliberate on how much other councils we're going to copy, or what's actually best for our communities? Because before, I think, Tanya, you said that, you know, if it's never sold, we might never get it, but that's actually no different to what it is now, that if it's never built, then we still don't get it. So that doesn't really work. Whereas I think the benefits of it going on settlement is that it gives clarity, it doesn't put the burden on the developer, but also I've just read an article around Selwyn and how the developers subdivided and then they pay all their DCs outright. And then if they're not sold for 5 years, in that time the DC actually goes up. So actually the lost value on DCs over that 5 years, because they got it at the 5 year ago rate, is actually a loss. Whereas if you did it at settlement, it happens at the growth time. So if you don't sell the section for 5 years, they're paying the DC at that 5 year mark, which is actually more reflective of growth. Sorry, my question again is, are we just copying everyone?
Yeah. Our responsibility on behalf of the Chief Executive is to give you advice to inform your decision making. In the case of the example of the research I talked about, there's a spectrum of approaches taken across local government. Officers may form a view on what they think is the best approach to take, but at the end of the day, it's with council to decide what it does with the advice and where it wants to lead its community. And you knew that.
Tanya?
And also just to clarify, what we would anticipate as officers that the DC amount is probably written into a condition of a resource consent. So the number is known for the developer, because I suspect we'll get pushback if in 5 years' time we said the number was 10 or 20 grand more per section. So I think the developers would expect certainty at the outset coming into an agreement. And certainly as council, we'd be entering into an agreement that we expect X amount to be paid on settlement. I don't think we'll be leaving that figure open, but obviously if council chose to do that, it can, but I expect the pushback from the developers in the future, potentially, because they're expecting to pay a certain amount when they're deferring that amount, and they're going to enter into an agreement with the purchaser. Yeah, so there's many ways you can do this. I think it's the short answer.
Just before you, Russell, Ian's got something to add.
Just further to what Tanya said, the example at the moment is reserve contributions, where they are dated generally at the date of application of the subdivision. So the figure that is put into the condition of the consent is actually backdated to a certain time, and that's in perpetuity for whenever they pay the reserve contribution. It is from that date, and that's out of fairness, unless the applicant decides otherwise, or it's agreed otherwise. And we had situations a couple of times when, due to market conditions, it was actually more advantageous to not have them detailed, but that was very, very specific market conditions for a year or two.
Councillor Ellis?
Thank you. Just when we come back to deliberations, can we just have some clarity around the magic date, I suppose? And if a subdivision's at a certain, because there's going to be some that are going to get caught if we make the change, that it's going to be quite awkward, and we need to discuss how that's going to work. And I mean, council itself has its own subdivision out at the business park, and we may be, who knows, in the middle of doing another stage of that, and we might be caught in this as well. So it'd just be nice to have some clarity around how that's going to work, and because someone will be caught out in the middle.
Sure. Yeah, transitional arrangements will be important, because you're quite right, and the worst thing would be to be accused or actually for it to happen, whereas the perception of double dipping,
Councillor Wilson?
So I just want to really clarify that point you made then, Ian. So you can do a subdivision, you get your DC set at a certain time, you don't have to pay for them until a long way down the track. So
through the chair, if that was the council's approach.
That's currently the council.
Through subdivision, through the reserve contributions.
Yes.
Yes, that is the approach. Yes.
Yep.
Richard?
It's also my understanding of how it would work going forward. It's at the time after 1 July, or from 1 July 2027, the DCs payable on that subdivision for each section would be the DCs at the time the subdivision was lodged. And so if settlement, if council is taking DCs at settlement, that could be 3, 4, 5, 10 years later. But it's the DCs in the schedule at the time that was subdivision was lodged that would apply. That's how the Local Government Act currently works, and under development levies there may be some refinement to that to allow interest to be charged, but that's a piece of legislation that's still got to go through Parliament.
Yep, thank you.
Topic 3 was the DC charges for 26, 27, 22 submissions. 12 supported the charges as proposed, 1 supported a phase-in, 8 supported other change, and the reasons given were no clear justification for increase, number of submitters repeated or expanded upon their concerns about holding costs and upfront invoicing. There was a suggestion here about waivers or longer deferment windows for affordable housing and small-scale builders. A request for some detailed guidance, a request that the review be deferred until the next 3-year cycle, which is actually 2027, and multiple comments in relation to Mount Somers water.
Councillor Wilson?
In the past, you probably would look at the long-term plan to see how your DCs could go out into the future, but with the change to with the water services plan not being in last long-term plan, is there information that we have that could, because it's easy to look back and say what they were, but project out into the future, because that was perhaps the delay looking forward into the future. It'd be interesting to understand what we think our DCs are going to do, especially with regards to water, because that's been quite a fundamental change in how we're budgeting and going forward with water as to what we were in the past, because we don't have as much control and the costs have been going up and all that. So it'd be interesting to understand where that goes in the future.
Yeah. So in the DCs that you're currently looking at, we've brought in year 1 of the water services delivery plan, but obviously we couldn't bring in years 2 through 10. We were looking to do that with the 2027 policy. Are you asking for a little bit of an advanced screening on what that might look like?
Because we're in the 3rd year of our last long-term plan, therefore there's going to be a fundamental change, you'd say, in the next long-term plan, because it wasn't in the last long-term plan, so we can only really use the annual plan away as the bit, and we haven't actually finalised the annual plan. So I just think for us to make a call on the holding cost or the cost of it going forward, we probably need to understand that, what it could be in the future a wee bit.
Yep, got that. Thank you.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. With the comments we've had around the Mount Somers water supply and the DC charge there, are we going to relitigate that through this process? Because initially we went out in a long-term plan process, only got one submission because I don't think people actually realised it was in there. So is that the intention of this, to relitigate that, or are we just simply going to deal with that by saying it is what it is and we're not here to discuss it?
The council went out with certain proposals, but those proposals included the charges for 2026-27, and so I think it's I find the word relitigate a little harsh. I think we have said that we're open to submissions on the policy as a whole, including the Mount Somers DC. So there is some potential. There is, I think, a reasonable expectation on behalf of submitters that you will look at that again.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. If that's the case, we're going to need the information we got and how we made the previous decision to come back to the deliberations, so we know how we got to the figure we got to, so that all that info's there, so that we're not just doing it as a knee-jerk reaction.
Councillor Gilkison.
In a lot of the submissions, including, I think, a lot of the ones from developers, where they talked about the increase in development contributions will minimise growth, and it's twofold. It's because it'll get more expensive, so people won't want to buy, but also they might not want to do business, and so really it compounds on itself. All of these development contributions go towards projects. So what happens if they're correct and we don't get the growth? So therefore we don't get the development contributions anyway. What happens then?
That's quite a complex question, because you'll appreciate that many of the projects that you're doing have a good chunk of renewal or level of service and increase in them, and the level of service increase is often directed by changes in government policy, drinking water standards, resource consents, those kinds of things. So if you found yourself in an environment where you were seeing the rates of growth falling, then I think the logical consequence of that would be that the growth component of future projects would be smaller. How you bring that in and over what time frame and how quickly you can recognise that is where it starts. My answer would start to get pretty speculative. But I think in broad principle, if you were seeing less growth, then you would expect to see less capex for growth.
Yeah, because I guess looking from across all of the changes that we're making, there was also the change from medium growth to high growth. So actually we've increased our predictors of growth in all your equations, yet all the other ones kind of indicate that maybe growth won't be so high.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the risk here, isn't it?
That is part of the uncertainty around this decision. Just to correct you slightly, what we moved from was a medium growth projection to a medium high growth projection, not from medium to high.
No, I think I said medium high, not high medium. Yeah, high. Yeah, medium high. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. Just to point out that if you're buying a section to build on, the cost is exactly the same. You either pay the DC when you buy the section, or you buy the section when you go to build, you pay it. So the cost is no different. The ability to raise funds on that section actually becomes easier if the DC is built into the price of the section. If you want to do a house and land package, you know what you're up for. You suddenly don't have another external bill you haven't budgeted for. So in that respect, but I do understand that if a developer has to borrow, pull a figure out of the air, $1 million to pay those DCs up front, someone's going to have to pay the interest component of that. I do understand that.
Councillor Wilson.
So it's a question. Would it be true then if the DC is set, say it was set 5 years ago, which you suggested some could be, when the 5 years comes up, if the money then is required to fulfil those needs of the DC, the infrastructure or whatever it was, that probably would have gone up in price. Therefore, the original DC won't be covering what it was designed for in the first place. Is that a fair consequence of it being delayed? The longer it's delayed, inflation it eats away at the funds of those DCs are available for us as the council and the wider community to use. So I'm not talking about the individual homeowner, I'm talking about the council itself has to fund it from somewhere, and if it was using DC money as time goes on, the DC money will be less effective, is the word I'd almost use, to do that funding, is that?
Yeah, that the time value of the money would decrease. Yep.
Next slide, I think, Richard. Thanks.
Topic 4 was about amending the revenue and financing policy. 20 submissions, 16 in favour, 4 opposed, and a number of this were opposed because they'd also opposed the new roading DC, so they were logically coherent. And again, there was a comment here about seeking clarification of the growth allocation. This is almost the last slide, I think. This was other changes and other comments. There were 10 submissions. There was a submission from Clark McLeod that talked about land use differentials, particularly retail, but also agricultural. Also spoke about the 5-year expiry of capacity credits. Mr. Breakwell's submission talked about removing the applied growth factor and the updated calculation methodology, which they opposed because it compounds costs for developers. And there were some issues regarding DCs on a non-consented standalone dwelling, including when they're invoiced, how the gross floor area is measured, differential for 3-bedroom non-consented small standalone dwellings, and the definition of. So,
any questions or comments?
Great. If there's nothing further, I'll hand back to the chair and we can get Mel in for the consideration of submissions and deliberations on planning and resource consent fees and charges, which is only half the mouthful that the chairman had at the start of the meeting.
Thank you. 11:27, by the way, Richard. AM. Thanks, Richard. Mel, were you wanting us to go through the submission booklet?
I have slides that we can look at the feedback at the same time.
Perfect, thank you. Are we better to have the full submission booklet open on our tablets?
The slides are working through the summary of feedback.
Okay, great.
All right, so as you'll remember, we proposed to the community to increase the planning and resource consent fees and charges above what we had indicated in the long-term plan to ensure that they reflect the cost to council. In response to this, we received 6 submissions with no submitters wishing to speak, and 5 of the 6 agreed with the proposal to increase the fees and charges. So if you take a look at page 3 in the summary of feedback on Stella, you'll find the reasons provided for the responses. So those that supported the proposal noted that it was the fairest option and should be user pays, and that it helps to keep the rates more affordable, and there were no reasons provided against the proposal. So I don't know if council wants to discuss the feedback on page 3. Or if you're happy to move on.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Wilson?
I'd take John Bell's comment that he accepts that user pays, he believes that should be in place, but probably you said the underlying is that the you don't just keep putting costs up and pass them on. So you need to be, we've got to the position where we've got to pass it on. That's the right concept, but actually what you're passing on is the more important discussion rather than actually passing it on. Because we've set our fees and then we've got to pay it, someone's got to pay it. And so we could either suck it up and put it on the general rate, or we could pass it on as fees. So this discussion's around the fees, but the first bit is probably the more important discussion we should be putting our minds to rather than who pays it at the end, because somebody's paying it.
Any other comments, questions?
All right. So if you take a look at page 4, you'll see the other comments that were provided. These included concerns around charging for time usage, concerns that council is putting too much up, and comments on the future development and funding for roads. Officers believe the final comment was meant for the development contributions review, so this comment will be included in the summary document for deliberations on the development contributions. So based on this slide and the previous slide, does council wish to make any changes to the proposed fees and charges based on the feedback provided?
Are we knowing? I think we're knowing.
Cool. All right. So the agreed fees and charges will be incorporated into the draft annual plan, which will be presented to council on the 17th of June for final adoption.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So easy. Thank you very much. It brings us to a close. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, everybody.